Hey guys, Tarke here. In today's video, I want to talk about some of the things that I wish we got to talk to Chris about on the latest Baeclast. So obviously we covered a lot in 3.5 hours. I recently counted all the questions because Ziz asked me how many questions we asked, and I believe it was 58 questions of our topic list. We got the topic list trimmed down to 63, I believe is the total, and of those 63, 58 got asked, and then obviously we went off topic a bit and we went a bit all over the place. So one thing which is always very interesting when you get these interviews is trying to prioritize what you do and don't ask. And basically that's kind of what we did, is we kind of shuffled, these are the main things we really want to hit, and then the things that would be nice to hit we kind of pushed towards the end. And we tried to make sure that everyone had like one topic at least, which was like, this is the thing that Ziggy really wants to talk about, this is the thing that Noogie really wants to talk about. So everyone kind of felt like they got to say their bit. Alongside, like, these were the key community questions, we had a section highlighted for that. So anyway, so one thing that I really wish we could have gotten to stress on was RSI issues. I know that Ziggy got to ask a few questions about clicking, but I kind of wish that we hammered the point a little bit more on that. We've spoken to GGG members in the past about clicking issues in Path of Exile and how it's destroying our fingers and stuff. And one thing I found quite interesting around the discussion of clicking and RSI is you still see it to an extent now that when it comes up, you get a lot of players saying, well, it doesn't affect me, it's a non-issue. However, I've noticed that feedback has shrunk, and over the years people are more in favor of us talking about clicking. And I'm kind of curious as to why that is. I don't know if it's a case of just general empathy is increasing in the player base, if it's just an issue that more people are becoming aware of, it's just as the player base gets older, it's affecting more people, or if it's a case of the game itself is becoming more click intensive and therefore it's affecting more people. I don't know the psychology behind it, but I have found it interesting that people seem much more receptive to the topic now. Likewise with the loot boxes. So yeah, the clicking thing is something I really wish that I got to hammer home. I made a video last league, I think it was something along the lines of Path of Exile is ruining my hands. I have serious issues with rheumatoid arthritis and RSI and stuff. I have Crohn's disease, which causes like inflammation. And yeah, it's something that I always have to kind of bat around. I do lots of exercise and stretches to kind of keep the digits all working nicely. And if I'm good with my breaks, it's kind of manageable. But it's ridiculous how much more work I need to put into maintaining my hands playing Path of Exile than any other game I play on the regular. And yeah, it's an issue. And whenever you have this conversation, people say, yeah, but what about fighting games? Or like, what about this thing that's worse? But anyway, it's something that I do wish that we'd got to hammer Chris on a little bit more. And maybe, you know, if someone like Ziz or Grim or Gazzy or anyone involved in the upcoming podcast is watching this, clicking stuff could be kind of neat if you get the time. Obviously, I understand that time is the main issue in all of these things. We were allotted, I believe we were told it was going to be like 2.5 hours of Chris's time, and we ended up getting to have him for 3.5 hours. It's a lot easier on a one-on-one interview. So I actually have some interview training because I'm a trained documentary filmmaker, not that it shows in any of my content. But yeah, so I do actually have some training in interview technique. And when it comes to a one-on-one interview, it's quite easy to, well, not quite easy, but it's much easier to manage your time. But when you have like a lot of other people on, I find it at least much harder to allocate time, because I'm kind of like, okay, well, I know that Rise wants to ask this question, but I'm not in Rise's brain, so I don't know exactly how that is. So maybe for, I believe the Ziz interview is just Ziz and Mathel, they might have a slightly easier time of time management because it's, you know, it's less factors. But that's just a boring aside. So the RSI is one thing that I really wish that we'd hammered more on. Another thing that I wish we'd gotten a little bit more focus on would have been some of the build diversity questions. So we kind of mentioned build diversity a few times. I know Rise had a lot he wanted to say on that topic in particular. And while Chris did give some good answers, it often felt like there was a bit of room where like we could have pushed a bit more there, but we were just kind of worried about the whole time thing. Another really good example of that would actually be about the UI. So we actually had a gotcha moment, which we didn't use. When talking about UI, Chris specifically mentioned how he didn't want Path of Exile players to have to, you know, do all this behind the scenes shenanigans just to get the game working and functioning in a proper way. and that the base UI should be good enough, and it's something they're going to have to look to improve. It's something they are looking to improve, and there will be improvements coming there. And that's a reasonable statement to make. However, I don't think it's that reasonable of a statement to make in Path of Exile when players have to do so much messing about just to get their filters to function, and filters are mandatory. You cannot play Path of Exile with the current loot system without filters. You need to do all this stuff for filters, you need to do all this stuff for Path of Building, trade sites, wikis, PoEDB. Like, there are so many external factors. You get people in Trade League who use stuff, Excellence, whatever it's called, price checking tools. Like, there are so many third-party tools that the game is reliant on that players regularly use, and it's just a fact of like, yeah, you play Path of Exile, you use all these things, and then we can't have that for the UI stuff because then players would have to be messing around with all this stuff in the background. It's not like filters are that straightforward. Even with Filter Blade, the player has to have some level of technical knowledge to kind of get that stuff all functioning correctly. So that was something that I wasn't too satisfied with from an answer, and something I kind of wish that we'd kind of hammered in a little bit more on. I think it's also kind of worth mentioning that I think there's often a bit of a disconnect sometimes between what players want from these podcasts. So my priority with these podcasts is often to like, yeah, get the community questions out there, make players feel heard, but also to have a proper discourse. And sometimes when you have those gotcha style moments like, oh, I could make Chris uncomfortable. Well, if all that happens is you just make someone uncomfortable and then they just say, I haven't got an answer for you, then that hasn't really achieved anything, because all you've done is just being like, well, we haven't got an answer. And there are lots of questions that we could have asked to which Chris would have just replied, I haven't got an answer for you at this current time, which doesn't really help. I think there are times where it's important to kind of push those slightly more uncomfortable topics, and I think the loot boxes would be an example of that. Loot boxes are something I feel very strongly about in gaming, and that was a topic that I felt we've hit enough of our topic list, and we're near the end of the show, that I'm just going to try and push this as far as I can, because I think it is really important as a topic, and I know a lot of people still don't think it is that significant, but it is a really big thing, and I was disappointed with the sentiment of, well, hopefully regulation will make the choice for us. I thought that was a bit of a cop-out, unfortunately. Another topic that I would have liked to have hit on would have been more of just like the industry at large, and the whole situation of how does Chris feel about the current treatment of employees in game dev, and there's a lot of stuff on that side of things, which is it's a messy topic for studio leads to talk about, obviously, but it is something that for me personally I think would have been interesting. But anyway, overall though, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty satisfied with the podcast. I think we did a good job. I think everyone on the cast did a really good job, and I think that we did present a lot of what we wanted to talk about. And aside from just one or two key things, the RSI really being the main thing, most of the other stuff is kind of considered by many fluff. Like me asking industry style questions, I'm sure it's very important to people in the industry or people trying to get into the industry, but not that important of a question for the average Path of Exile player. But yes, I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Maybe that'll be interesting to some of you, by the way. Bye-bye.